I find it amusing that after every POI that Marty gives, the speakers from Clarete say, well, moving on to my issues, or moving on to my first argument. Because, Mr. Chair, it's apparent to us that, well, they really can't defend their case properly. Because what are they telling us? How are they responding to our points? When we're trying to nuance into the court system, when we're trying to protect the right to life, all they can say is, well, it's a private affair, it's in the bedroom, therefore it's not admissible in court. We say, Mr. Chair, it's not very dynamic coming from their side. Because what we're telling you is, even if it's a private affair, even assuming but not conceding, and even if maybe it's not admissible in all cases, we say that when justice is when we're actually trying to mete out the right or the proper justice to particular criminals, we say that we have to take into consideration all possible evidence that is available to us. And we say that, as I already raised in a point of information, that is a value that these courts have to protect and that these courts have to uphold over this right to privacy. Because we say that right to privacy is trampled on many occasions, Mr. Chair. We say, for example, when national security is at risk, there's media blackouts. And even in the court itself, Mr. Chair, we say that they still cross-examine people, they still ask them personal questions, but we say we don't ban those things, do we, Mr. Chair? So what's so different about sexual history? We say, Mr. Chair, that when you're talking about sexual history, which, as proven already by the speakers on the opposition side, can be admissible in court, why must they be so stern and say no, it's not admissible in court? Let's talk about two issues in this debate today. First of all, which actually better upholds the value of justice as compared to the value of privacy. And secondly, let's talk about the benefits to the court systems at the end of the day. First, let's take a look at this principle on the value of justice. Because we have to talk about justice as a value that the courts hold higher than everything else. We say, Mr. Chair, that when you're talking about meting out the proper sentences to criminals, we say that you have to prove them guilty beyond reasonable doubt. And proving beyond reasonable doubt entails that you take into consideration all evidence that is available to you. Physical evidence, circumstantial evidence, and if in this case, cross-examination evidence and sexual history. We say that if those can be admissible in court, why can't the court take them into consideration? We say, Mr. Chair, that in the case of sexual history, despite it being private, we say that the higher value in this debate is meting out the proper punishment, because we don't want to condemn the wrong person and or release the wrong person release the wrong person conversely. Because we say, Mr. Chair, that in a lot of court trials where they've used up all the particular evidence available to them, we say that sexual history might be, for example, the final arbiter to the guilt or innocence of people. And we say, why can't we take those things into consideration as well? That's why, Mr. Chair, we say that it's quite that the responses of government side have actually been quite inadequate to this. Because we have to take a look at the gray areas in these particular cases. Because we say there are a lot of gray areas here when we don't know really whether or not a person is guilty or innocent, and we don't have anywhere to go. We say, Mr. Chair, that they keep arguing that sexual history is not completely effective. Well, we say, Mr. Chair, that sexual history is not the only thing that we're going to use to determine guilt or innocence. We say, Mr. Chair, that sexual history will be tied back to all other evidences that we gather, and then we're going to determine the guilt or innocence of a person. It's not the only thing that we're going to use, Mr. Chair. But moreover than that, we say that the courts also don't only look at the physical evidences, but they also look at things like motives, things like the psyche of these people and how they think. Because we say, Mr. Chair, that a lot of crimes are determined based on this. For example, is there a higher possibility that this person whose sexual history is that she's very promiscuous, that she sleeps with random guys and all of these things, is there a higher propensity that she was raped, or that she actually maybe got drunk and had sex with this person, woke up in bed, got mad, and therefore accused him of rape? It's that way. We say, Mr. Chair, that these types of things can be determined by sexual history. Because in times when witnesses are not present, in times when physical evidence is not enough to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt, we say, Mr. Chair, that then you take into consideration the other evidences that you have, and in this case, sexual history. Yes.
Even if she's drunk, it doesn't justify that you have to take advantage of that person. Next, we need you still have the burden to prove, because you're only proving that it establishes connection and establishes motive. How can that help in adjudicating the case of that criminal?
Mr. Chair, we say that the first thing that you have to prove in court cases is that obviously the crime happened, but you also have to prove the motive behind the crime. Mr. Chair, these are two things that the courts always have to prove for a person to be guilty. Now, assuming that you have enough physical evidence already to prove that the person did indeed commit these particular crimes, or even if you don't, we say that you still have to establish motive, and we say that motive can be established by the using of sexual history, as we've talked about already in the entirety of our case. We say, Mr. Chair, that government side is being so absolutist and arguing so generically, saying that, well, people have a right to privacy. We have to defend that right to privacy. Sexual history is privacy. Therefore, we can't violate that right to privacy. Without necessarily responding to so many of the nuances of opposition side. When, for example, Marty talked about how if we condemn the wrong person, if we take away his rights, even if he's not guilty, we say that's something that the justice system does wrong. And we say, Mr. Chair, that we don't want that to happen, because we say that again our stance is that we'd rather release 20 guilty people than condemn one innocent person and take away his rights, because we say that the state does not stand for that, and the state always errs on the side of caution. And we say that we have still yet to hear sufficient response coming from government side. But moreover than that, Mr. Chair, when we take a look at what actually benefits the parties involved, we say that government side seems to be working under the assumption that this rape victim was actually raped, therefore we can violate her privacy and all these kinds of things. Mr. Chair, they never responded to our idea that, well, there might be a potential to abuse, there might be a potential that, this rape victim wasn't actually raped, she's just accusing this person and all these kinds of things. We say, Mr. Chair, sexual history is admissible in these cases, and we say, Mr. Chair, that then we have to count that in as well. Because, Mr. Chair, the law never assumes guilt, it never assumes innocent. It's always based on the facts that you present to them. And we say, Mr. Chair, that since government side seems to be under this notion that the rape victims were already raped, we say here on the opposition side, we're not assuming anything. We're not assuming that they're guilty, we're not assuming that they're innocent. What we're doing is we're looking at the evidence, and we say that the evidence is the one that will do the talking, that will do the determining. And since we say that sexual history can be one of those factors that will do the talking and do the determining for us, we say, why is it so impossible for us to include it during court cases? Because we say that it's more reasonable to believe that if this particular evidence will help us, then why not take advantage of it? So we say at the end of the day, the more reasonable side wins, and that side is opposition. Thank you.